Okay. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming to the last session today. I realize I'm the only thing between you and that cocktail hour, but hopefully this will inspire um, the next part of your journey at the conference. But it's really interesting. I was looking outside as I was going up to get my paraphernalia for the presentation, and I realized something really magical was happening. It was snowing in March in the southern part of the state. And I thought, wow, what an incredible metaphor for this presentation today, which is dealing with steam. And if you think about all the different aspects of water, I come from Philadelphia, so that's water and Virginia. But anyway, if you think about the notion of water and how that can transform and change, that's really what this presentation is going to be about today. So I have some kind of magical power, so I was able to make it look like a snow globe, that we were inside of a snow globe. But anyway, as you can see, the name of this presentation is called Putting Some Steam into STEM. And this is something I have been very, very passionate about. I came into the world many, many years ago full of awe and wonder. And I really wanted to be a scientist when I grew up, but unfortunately I came into the world severely dyslexic, which I didn't really understand and realize until I was a college professor. So that sort of precluded an opportunity to be a scientist. But that love for science was something that has always stayed with me. And I think for me, the real magic about science is it is about awe and wonder. So two years ago, I had an idea that there might be a way of using what I do as an art professor to inspire and inform how we think about science and how we deliver science education. So I did what I'm going to encourage you to do is to apply for some VCCS money to investigate an idea. It's a lot of hard work, as you'll see from my presentation. But I can honestly say after 2 years, it's probably one of the most exciting things and journeys I've been on in my 35 years teaching at Nova. So first I'd like to thank the VCCS for their very generous support of many VCCS grants, as well as the Chancellor's Commonwealth Professorship, and also my college, Northern Virginia Community College, for supporting me on this journey. For me, these are some of my early tools of discovery. As I mentioned, I grew up in the 1950s, and these are my actual microscope, my chemistry set, and a telescope that I actually built with my dad. The components came from Edmonds Scientific Company. I grew up in Philadelphia, so we went across the river and illegally brought the telescope back into Pennsylvania. But it was that sense of wonder of actually being able to investigate invisible worlds that I really believe planted seeds of what I'm doing now as a result. And I don't know if we have any, do we have any chemists in the audience here? Because as you know, this type of chemistry set would be totally illegal in this day and age. So, and the great thing about chemistry is you always knew something was happening if it smelled bad. So we did a lot of things with sulfur down in my laboratory down in my basement. My big sort of break between creating a bridge between art and science came in 2005 when I was invited to create 16 new sculptures for an exhibition at the American Center for Physics up in College Park, Maryland. And it was to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Einstein's discovery of relativity. I basically had 3 months to create 16 sculptures. At the time, I was also creating a large installation for another exhibition. When I got the email, I thought about it for about 5 minutes. I love Einstein, so how could I let him down? And the next day, I emailed the curator, and I said, yes, I would do that. And she said, are you out of your mind? I said, well, I got to see if I can do it. So I went into my class, and I said to my students, no whining. this is what I'm doing in the next 16 weeks. I don't want to hear any whining from anyone. And not only did I finish the 16 sculptures, but I did it with 2 months to spare. And the only way I think that happened was through quantum physics. So the process was about the work. But this is some of the work. I just want to mention to you that my sculpture is on the right side of the screen. I just want to show you some of the things that I investigate and that I look at on my journeys with science. And one of the things I'm very interested in, and one of the things that I've been investigating as part of this Chancellor's Professorship, is looking how through time and through the history of both science and art, how man has created visualization tools that enable us to see things that are invisible. And this very beautiful armorial sphere, you can start seeing how it's influenced certain sculptures that I've done. This is a really great piece. It's called Doppler effect. And what was interesting about this, during the time I was working on this project, I was in Salzburg. And I didn't realize that Salzburg is not only the home of Mozart, but also Mr. Doppler. And only, sorry. And only in Europe would they name a candy after a scientist. And as you see here, this is the actual diagramming of what Doppler effect is about. This particular piece, Cosmos for Carl, was an homage to Carl Sagan, whose book Cosmos was the first thing I decided to take off my shelf when I was given this sculpture challenge. And very auspiciously, I opened it to a page that talked about Einstein and what he thought riding on a wave of light would feel like when he was 14. As a result of that exhibition, I was invited to come and be an artist in residence at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia. And as a Philly gal, it was really exciting to be able to go back home and to actually go through the library and collection that was actually started by Ben Franklin in 1746 to actually what he said to, so people could really understand useful knowledge. Ben Franklin, as many of you may or may not know, had this incredible fascination with mathematics. I have actually seen notes that he took for the American Congress where he was actually working on magic squares at the same time he was recording his notes. So he doodled as well, but he doodled in mathematics. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called the Magic Circle of Circles. And what my challenge was to create work that was a response to their special collections, and then an exhibition would happen at the back end of this residency that I did. So what you're seeing here is an actual response, a sculptural response to Ben Franklin's Magic Circle of Circles. One of the other really wonderful things in their collection is they have the complete notebooks of John Archibald Wheeler. Anyone know who Wheeler is? He's actually the father of dark matter and black hole. He was a contemporary of Einstein's at Princeton. And they have all his notebooks. And as you see here, this is a page from his notebook. And at the same time that I was researching, they were deassessing the card catalog at this particular library. So what I did is I created my own notion of a black hole. And what it's doing, it's ingesting all the cards from the card catalog, all the John Wheeler cards and all the black hole cards. This particular piece now is in the collection of the reading room of that particular library. At the end of the exhibition, what we decided to do was to, in these beautiful vitrine cases that are at this library, and just to give you an idea, this library is located down in Independence Mall in that area, down on the 3rd and Chestnut Street, was to mount an exhibition of my work in relationship to the work that was that had informed and inspired it. And it was really exciting because it brought in a whole new group of people that would not necessarily go into this library. I mean, most of the people that go into this library are people doing research for books. I'm so excited. At the same time that I was working on that project, I had an opportunity. I was invited to do a lecture in Santiago, Chile, and I came in from a very long overseas flight, and I had a vision of the periodic table of elements. At first I thought jet lag, bad food. I mean, who has these kind of visions? And so I know myself well enough. I'm extremely intuitive. When I get a hit of something of that magnitude, and I think the periodic table, it's probably the greatest science icon of all time, comes into my consciousness, I'm supposed to do something with it. So my journey took me down to the Chemical Heritage Foundation, which is also down in Philadelphia, right across the street from the American Philosophical Society, because I felt I really needed to understand the genesis, the beginning of chemistry and this icon. And what you're actually looking at here is, this is a first edition of Mendelev's periodic chart. Now, most of us, I know people are like, oh my God. I know I get chills just at the thought of 11th grade chemistry, and I'm sure some of you in the audience are feeling the same way. But what's really astonishing about Mendeleev was the fact that he was able to plot visually the placement of these elements in a classified way. But even more incredible than that, he was able to leave spaces where he knew elements would be discovered later on, and he was spot on. That is astonishing. So back to my original problem to solve, was to take this periodic table of elements and make it so beautiful that people would want to learn more about it, especially kids. That's what I challenged myself with. So after a year of research, which took me up into the Himalayas, and what I realized in Bhutan on a sabbatical was that the periodic table was our Western cosmology. And I realized that looking at mandalas, cosmic mandala in Bhutan, and realizing that that was Eastern cosmology, it occurred to me that everything about our universe is encoded in that Mendeleev chart. Having that epiphany, all of a sudden it became very magical to me, almost like a magic carpet. It could take me to just incredible places, and it has, as you'll see. Of all the aspects of the periodic table, the thing that really resonated with me were the orbital patterns. And for a number of reasons. Sometimes they're called clouds. We really don't know what they look like. They just, we can sort of approximate. And I love that fact that there wasn't an absolute about it, that it had some wiggle room for interpretation. It just seemed like the perfect form to work with. So I had a vision. My vision was working with the orbital patterns of the 83 naturally occurring elements, starting with hydrogen all the way up to bismuth, number 83 or 84. I took each of the columns of the periodic table, and I took all the elements of each of the 8 columns, and I put them on their own Fibonacci spiral, then rotated the Fibonacci spirals. So I thought, oh my God, this is way over my head. What have I gotten myself into? So I hooked up with the architect for the new art building at George Mason University through a friend, and I thought, I need to bring an architect in to help me land my vision on the ground plane here. And so I called Alec up. He said, I love your idea, but it can't be done. I said, no, you don't understand. If I'm seeing it up there, it can be done. So he said, all right, give me a week, let me see what I can do. And he called me in 2 days. He said, not only can it be done, what you're seeing is magnificent, and I can really help you manifest it. So what you're seeing here is the plot of my vision that he said could not be done. And here is the architectural rendering of what it looked like, because it was to be installed, which it was at the Greater Reston Art Center, which is up in Reston, Virginia, in a very unusual space, which is octagonal, and it had a column in it. So the notion was to start the smaller elements coming down the column and then have them spiral out on the floor. And what you're seeing here, these orbital patterns out here are in alignment with my initial vision. And this is one of my favorite images. This is me building the universe in my basement studio. It took me almost a year to fabricate these 83 orbital sculptures. And this is the installation view of the piece. Very interestingly, it has been gifted to George Mason University for their new science building, but now it has changed, and it looks like we're going to develop a, I don't know how to say this, but we're going to create a collaborative course that's going to enable a consortium of different disciplines to come together to figure out how to make this a mobile, transportable installation that will be taken throughout the state. I know, this just happened. And actually, part of it is going to happen here at the Taubman Museum. That just happened this morning. So anyway, you guys are the first to know about this. Yeah. See, all things are possible, but you have to be open to that possibility. Okay, what you're hearing now is atomic music. As I was working on my vision, I had a sense I needed to incorporate sound. And I knew there was someone out in the universe that shared my vision. It took me about 6 months to find out who actually lives in Portland, Oregon. And she was investigating what I was using sound. So this is how it goes. Anything that moves or vibrates creates sound. That sound is totally inaudible. She uses an MRI technology to be able to make it audible. What's even more incredible than that is we share the same birthday. So I knew that the universe had brought us together for this. So what you're seeing here is her computer screen, how she composes these compositions. She has taken all the sounds that is made from these 83 elements and uses them to create compositions. So the whole notion was, as you walk through this installation, you not only experienced it through seeing it, you heard it. And it was very powerful. They had over 4,000 people come from the area to this art center to have this experience. It was also used as a way to bring students in from the schools so they could, have an appreciation for chemistry. And then I thought, okay, we have sight, sound, let's get the party started. Let's bring the dancers in. So we have a wonderful contemporary dance troupe, Jane Franklin dance troupe. So I challenged her dancers to use this environment to create an interpretation of the periodic table. And so, if you probably don't know by now, I'm a cross-disciplinary type of gal. So, and in my realm, really, all things are possible. So as a result of this project, I thought I need to figure out how I can use what I love to do, which is teaching, to expand this dialogue larger. And it was after that project I decided to apply for a VCCS grant. And after 33 years of teaching at Nova, I felt like I needed a way to reinvent myself, to really take all these incredible opportunities and experiences I've had and share them. So my journey over the last 2 years has taken me to all these places that you see on the screen, and there were more, but graphically I couldn't fit them all in. And I've been doing a lot of lecturing, talking, and as you can see, it's a full range from universities, state schools, Ivy League schools, Harvard Center for Astrophysics, MIT, and it's been astonishing how excited people are in terms of what's being generated with this work. I'm actually working on several collaborative projects at the moment. The first one is at the Center for Astrophysics up at Harvard. And what we're doing is we're working on a project that deals with the chemical origins of the universe and the fact that the Harvard University Observatory was actually started by women, named the computers, back in the late 1800s. And actually, they were not trained scientists. They were paid 25 cents an hour to observe the brilliance of the stars to calculate the distance. And it's a great story because what happened was males were brought in to do this job, but they weren't doing a hot job. So the supervising person said, my maid could do a better job, and brought his maid in, and she did a phenomenal job. And there was this whole group of women that for over 20 years did these stellar calculations. So part of my project is dealing with telling their story and how it's influenced modern-day astrophysics. So as part of this project, I'm working with the curator for astronomical photographs, Harvard's collection of historic scientific instruments, and also the Center for Astrophysics. And I'm also very, very interested in chemical origins of the universe. And what that means is how, after Big Bang, what was thrown out from Big Bang, how that ended up in our bodies. These are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, trying to understand how this works. So I'm really taking on, you know, I'm at the legacy time in my career. I really need to get this solved before I leave Earth. So this is where I'm heading. The image you see at the bottom here is a really exciting discovery that was made by a young scientist over at NASA, and I got to interview him. And what they have found is meteorites that have fallen from Antarctica, or in Antarctica, have traces of nucleobases. And what that means is, yeah, hello. You figure it out. It's very exciting. And actually, I got to hold one in a test tube, but because what's interesting about this meteoritic matter, it can't be contaminated. So it has to be handled very carefully, because if it gets contaminated, then it screws up all the data. So anyway, that's pretty exciting, and I think it has something to do with my notion of chemical origins of the universe. So I'm tucking that bit of information away. Also, during this 2-year period, I was invited to do an exhibition in honor of Georgetown University's opening of their new science building. And I told them the only way I'd be willing to do that if they would let me work with their special collections. And Georgetown University has a wonderful dysfunctional observatory. I mean, back in the 1800s and 1900s, it worked beautifully, but for some reason there's mechanical issues, so it's not functional. But what's significant about their collection is this beautiful chromiolithographic print done by Angelo Secchi. And Angelo Secchi was from the Vatican. He actually taught at Georgetown, but what was very interesting was the fact that he was the first person to develop stellar classification. Now, what's interesting about this, my girls up at Harvard, the computers, they simplified his system, and actually they made it better. So we do not use Secchi's system anymore. We use the Harvard Gals. So, and the people at Harvard didn't know about Secchi, and the people at Georgetown didn't. So it was really fun to be able to uncover this, because I was doing this research at the same time. So these are 2 installation shots from that. And one of the things, an homage to Secchi, because he did a wonderful book on solar flares. That was really his passion. And what I started realizing with my work with scientists is that both science and art is in the storytelling business. It's all about the narrative. And what you see here, this is a beautiful solar image that was captured at the solar lab up at the Center for Astrophysics, which is just an amazing experience to behold. It's like the size of a room, and it shows the sun activity in real time. And actually, on one of my trips up to Harvard, they were having a lot of solar flare activity. They weren't sure if we were going to be able to get back, because it really affects computers and flying. And what you see here, Kircher, 1664, one of his engravings of sunspots, and then my interpretation here. So you see 3 different ways that this whole notion of solar narratives are created. During the same period of time, I was invited to come up to the NIH to do a lecture. And as a result of that lecture, probably about 2 years or a year and a half ago, I was invited to have a three-month fellowship up at NIH last year working with neuroscientists last summer. And it was really wonderful. The whole notion was for this to create a dialogue between myself and neuroscientists. And this was a poster that was created for the 3 months that I was up there. I interviewed scientists or neuroscientists. I worked with summer interns, which you'll see in a minute. But my residency started out with this image that you're seeing here. And what you're seeing here is a technology called tomography. And what it does is it scans the eye. And what you're seeing here is actually my eye, the optic nerve. And now you're seeing inside of my eye. And it was really unbelievable because when I had heard about this technology, I had to see what was going on in there. How does an artist see? What does it look like? What is the mechanism? So you start seeing the rods and the cones. Unfortunately, they found a problem with my retina. The good news is that they were able to fix it, but it was interesting. Had I not been curious, it could have had not a positive outcome. So anyway, what you're seeing here is some of the dialogues. I had about 24 dialogues with neuroscientists over a 3-month period about their research. And what you're seeing here is some of the research of some of the people that I got to interact with. And how this came about was someone sitting in the audience of my lecture said to me, "You must come to my office and see some etching." I thought, okay, that works for me. So anyway, this was the image that I was shown. It's an actual image of the retina by Santiago Ramon y Cajal, which I'll talk about in a little bit, who has since become a major muse in my life. And it was astonishing to me seeing this image because this image enabled me to solve a problem with this sculpture. And I had been very just taken by this image of Kircher back, again, alchemist back in the 16th century. And this was his view of water. Now, what was interesting when my neuroscientist colleague saw it, he saw it as the inside of the retina. And he saw it as starburst Amerkin cells, which you can see here. I was stuck. I could only create this, and after seeing these images, I was able to finish the sculpture. And as a result of them seeing the finished product, I was offered the fellowship. And so as I was investigating different aspects of neuroscience, one of the things that became very interesting to me is this notion of what are called standing waves and patterns of waves. And what you see is if you take water and you vibrate it at very high frequencies, there's a geometry that starts occurring. This is water that you're looking at very high frequencies. And these frequencies relate to sound waves, which you see here. This is a string, and when it's vibrated, the more it's vibrating, it creates these incredible patterns. What you're seeing here is actually a harmonic. And that was the inspiration to this notion, which you'll see in the next image, of man is the measure of all things. Because what you see here is that, and actually Protagoras came up with this notion, and then we see Da Vinci actually using this notion. And then you start seeing that literally you can, by using what we call sacred geometry, is you can plot the human body and it creates a harmonic. And that was the inspiration for this sculpture called The Measure of All Things. Now, what was interesting when I presented this sculpture to colleagues, neuroscience colleagues, one of my colleagues got very excited and she said, "Oh my God, that's constructive interference." And I said, "What is that?" And she said, "It is the measure of all things. It's literally what you titled your sculpture." And what you're seeing here is you're seeing the relationship of the water in the world around us and its relationship to the fact that we're made up of not 80% water in our body. So it's sort of that dialogue between inside and outside, micro and macro, which is something that I've always been very fascinated with. So as I was continuing my investigation in neuroscience, I was very interested in cell structures. And what you're seeing here is a very beautiful image that has been captured. I believe this one's from NIH, of the cell, the structure of the cell. And I was very interested in this notion of how there have been scientists who have become artists. And one of those people is Ernst Haeckel, who's one of my heroes. Ernst Haeckel worked, he was a contemporary of Darwin. He worked during 1860, and he was very fascinated with what's called radiolarium, which are these one-cell organisms. And in his lifetime, he documented over 4,000 of them, which is amazing that there was such diversity. What's really extraordinary about these one-cell organisms is they ingest sand and they excrete these just astonishing crystalline structures around them. So what you're seeing here are these beautiful crystalline structures. And that inspired this particular piece called Cellular Dialogue. And I use this title here, Dialogue, because what you're seeing is my interpretation of the human cell and its relationship to the sea. And then you see these relationship to radiolarium form here. Now my colleague, my neuroscience colleague, came over a couple weeks ago to see what was cooking in my studio, and he got very excited because when he saw this, he said, wow, that really relates to Nissl sting, which I didn't know what that was. But I love the fact that something I did created another further dialogue with the scientist. So here is my latest muse de jour, Santiago Ramon y Cajal. He came to me very early into my residency. He was the inspiration for the piece that enabled me to create this bridge between art and neuroscience last summer. An incredible story. He becomes the model of this work between STEM and STEAM because his story is incredible. At age 8, he wanted to be an artist. He did hundreds and hundreds of drawings, but by the time he was an adolescent, his father said, no, you have to be a physician like me. This drawing you're seeing here, this is a drawing he did when he was 8 years old. It's astonishing. And I got to go to Madrid about a month ago to go through his archives, and I saw this drawing and I was totally floored. His ability to not only see, but to record planted the seed for him to win the Nobel Prize, to see what no one else could see at that moment in time, the notion of the neuron doctrine. It was incredible. This is Cajal in the studio, or laboratory. And actually, I want you to read this quote because it's so wonderful. His writing is so poetic. Oh my God, I get giddy if you couldn't tell. But this is what's so significant to me about Cajal's work. What you're seeing here is what is called a histological slide for anyone who's not a science person in the audience. And here is his drawing. So you see what he was looking at under the microscope, and you could see his ability to coax out all this visual information. He had such an astonishing intuitive sense, to the point where he could figure out how the electrical currents were moving through neurons, because a lot of the drawings that I observed, you could see him put arrows that would show the flow through the neurons. It was incredible. So what you're seeing here, I was invited as a guest of NIH at the beginning of March to come to Cajal, to come to Madrid, and to not only research his archives, but to also present a lecture on my work and Cajal's influence on it. So what you're seeing here, this is a Cajal drawing. And the thing about Cajal that's so interesting is in all of his drawings, he had this ability to look at different species and to show the similarity in his drawing, or one drawing, which is really fascinating to me. This is one of my pieces here. Hello. And this is one of the new pieces. Actually, you're one of the first people to see it. besides the neuroscientist. Um, just things that were of interest to me. Actually, Cajal was the first to identify what's called a growth cone, which is a new neuron, how it develops. And this is an original Cajal drawing. This is my response to the Cajal drawing. And then this is a really exciting piece for me because this tells the story of modern day neuroscience. And what you're seeing here, Camille Goggi, who also shared the Nobel Prize with Cajal back in 1906, his theory was actually wrong. And I heard that the Nobel acceptance speech was quite contentious because there was almost like a catfight happening between these two scientists when they were accepting their awards. But anyway, Goggi, who actually developed the stain that enabled Cajal to see what no one could see, thought that the neurons were a net. And Goggi refined the stain, and he said, no, it's not a net. It's actual independent neurons. So that's what was very significant. So this quote at the bottom captured my imagination, and it was a quote by Cajal, and he talked about, he felt like an etymologist, and he talks about these butterflies of the soul, gray matter. And during my investigation, I saw this beautiful drawing he did of what's called Purkinje cells. And when I saw that Purkinje cell, I knew at that moment what he was talking about, butterflies of the soul. So what you're seeing here is a sculpture that's about 5 feet tall. And what it talks about is how these butterflies of the soul are emerging out of this Goggi form and then coming into what we know as modern day neuroscience. So this shows you the anatomy of this piece. So now, how have I been distilling all this excitement that I've had over the last 2 years? I had another vision. I think by now you have a sense that I have visions. But my vision was that there was a way that we could use the excitement of what I was experiencing and use it to enhance how science was understood. So what happened was I was invited to create a pilot program for the Aspiring Scientist Artist Program at George Mason University. This is where summer interns come to George Mason to do research. And what I do is I go in during their orientation and I challenge them to think of their research and interpret it using art. We're now in the 3rd year. We're coming up to the 3rd year. And these are 2 women, young women, who were working with neuroscience. And they were dealing with the hippocampus region, which deals with spatial memory. So what they did was to interpret their research, turning this into constellations. This was a project done by 3 different interns working with bioinformatics. They could not figure out how their research intersected, but the art enabled them a conduit to create this bridge between their 3 different research projects, and these are 2 of their projects. And as you can see, one of the projects was selected for the winter edition of Neuroinformatics magazine. So now we have art not only as information, but we have it as metaphor. And we have it now. These are high school students who have their work published in the Science Journal. We also captured the imagination of the Science Museum of Virginia down in Richmond, and an exhibition was installed last summer of some of my periodic table work, along with the work of the science intern, to just talk about this relation of art and science. As part of my residency at NIH, we decided that we would try this with some of their science interns. They have a very unique group. One of the groups of their science interns are Native American. And I have a real fondness for this because when I student taught back in the 70s, when I was getting my degree in art education, I actually taught on the Navajo Indian Reservation. So to have an opportunity to revisit this later in my career was quite exciting. And what I wanted to do was I created a PowerPoint where I took aspects of science and I wanted to show it in their different cultural relics. So what you see here is a crystalline structure of iron, and you can see that it manifests in this crystal pattern of the Navajo rug. This notion of pattern as storyteller, where you see neuronal networks, and this notion of actual storytellers in Native American culture. And this is one of the pieces that developed from one of the Native American interns. She was working with researching Parkinson's disease, and one of the things that one of her jobs was to record the stories of people with Parkinson's disease to try to understand more about that disease. And what she's done is she's used drawing to express some of the conflict that people with Parkinson's disease experience. And this is actually what Parkinson's disease looks like in the brain as opposed to the normal brain, just for anyone who's not familiar with this. Another project that I did was a collaboration for a course that we're offering at Northern Virginia Community College that deals with different aspects of water. And I was invited to do a lecture on the art of water. And what I did was to invite one of our music professors to use my PowerPoint to inspire a musical composition. And his musical composition, you can hear in the background, is now inspiring me to do a whole series that will be of my own unique work that will be part of this performance. So now, I'm taking it on the road even more, and I was invited to collaborate with Virginia Tech, the Montgomery County Public Schools, which is down in Christiansburg, Virginia Tech, Blacksburg area, and the Montgomery Floyd Library last September, and I was there for 5 days. It was so wonderful because what we did is we worked with high school students around the notion of DNA and using art to express different aspects of DNA. And so I worked with the teachers, I worked with the students, and it was really exciting because what it was doing was starting to prove to me that my hypothesis could work, and it was working really well. This is something new that just developed. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this, but last year, USA Today, or USA Scientific and Engineering Festival, is a big festival that started in California. They have, for 2014, they have what they call Nifty 50 Speakers Bureau, and I've been invited along with astronauts and engineers and high-level scientists to talk about the intersection of art and science. I believe I'm the only art person that's been invited to be part of this group of speakers that will go out and talk to schools throughout the tri-state area up in Northern Virginia. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then wrapping this up, and I decided to put this in because we're getting close to Earth Day. This is a project that I did with a colleague of mine in the English department who is very passionate about the environment, and said, what can we do with students to challenge them? So what we did is we had them take Bill McGibbon's book, Earth, and to transform it into statements about the environment. And we had a wonderful exhibition at the library at the Alexandria campus. And in conclusion, this journey for me has been about exploration. This is me at the Cahal Institute looking through this microscope. And what's interesting is to discover that under this blackness of goji stains, there's a whole wonderful, magical world that exists that can only be seen when you take a closer look. And using it as a wonderful way of building bridges and planting seeds. And one of those seeds that we planted as part of our project was an Invigorating STEM symposium at our college, which now I'm happy to report is turning into a course where through CITL, which is our Center for Teaching for Excellence, we've started a STEAM community learning group. And we're going to be doing a project where we're going to have students be mentored by someone in the arts or humanities, and in science to create work that they'll be getting credit for. So this is new. This actually just happened on my group here. I just got an email that's happening. So anyway, thank you very, very much. I appreciate you coming at the end of your day. Has any questions? See what's possible in 2 years. And no sleep. I didn't tell you I don't sleep much. I really don't. But no one has any. Oh my God. Oh please.
The materials that you were using, is it acrylic on Mylar? Is that acrylic paint on
Yes,
Mylar? And
acrylic
then you manipulate the Mylar into shape?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I've been actually working with Mylar for I would say almost 20 years. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I'm fascinated. You're so often invited here, there, or the other place. How are people hearing of your work and then making this lovely invitation? How do you get your ideas out there?
Just like I'm doing today. It has been unbelievable. I went to Harvard to do some research, invited to present a lecture. Basically, they said, "How can we get you up here for more than 3 days?" And it's been astonishing to me. I mean, actually, I'm going to make this formal announcement. I've actually decided, because the momentum has been so great and enthusiasm for this work, I've decided after 35 years I'm not using the R word. I'm transitioning into really working on this full time. I'm at the legacy point in my career. I've been at NOVA for 35 years. I've loved it. It's enabled me to do this life work. But now I feel, in order to keep this momentum going, excuse me, I really need to do it. But really, I go out and I lecture about this work, and it just seems invitations have just been coming from everywhere. I don't know. Maybe it's a magic dust. You're going to let me get off that easy? You guys are all teachers, and you're going to let me get off that easy? Okay, all right. Uh-oh, my hardest critic.
Well, you know, I have no talent. How did you build those structures that you spent 2 years? I don't understand the construction of those, the periodic, you know, stacked in different sizes and different widths, and what was that?
Well, it took me a long time to figure out the calculations of the scale. But if you look at the orbital patterns, they're literally stacked like that. So basically what I did was to interpret them. The whole notion of this was to create them as a garden, where you walk through it and experienced it through both sight and sound. So they're literally layers that are built up on fiberglass rods that are self-supporting. You're going to have to come back to the Taubman if you want to see them in person.
And when would that be?
We're starting to work on that. Yeah, probably within the year.
Liquors involved, I'll be there.
Any other questions?
Are any of these exhibits up right now where you could go visit them? Or are they all in between?
They're all in between. Actually, I just got an email this morning. I'm going to be having a show at a place called Biz Arts in Rockville with another woman whose work I'm not familiar with. And someone literally had seen the work online. I just got an email and asked, and I thought that would be great. So, yeah.
Near the end, you showed a collaboration with English students, but it looked like art projects. What's the connection with English?
It was an English colleague of mine in the humanities program who is very passionate about the environment. And he said to me, "What can we do?" He knows me. He knows I can't say no to him or to any project. And so I came up with this notion of taking the book and altering it. What I didn't share with you is that my students challenged myself and another colleague of mine to do a project as well. And what we did is we took 5 of the books and I ran the pages of the book through my shredding machine. And Denny, that's my English colleague, he has these super worms, and they made compost out of the book. And we made these beautiful hanging planters, which are now in our library. And they're still doing well. It's amazing because it's been about a year or two since that project. And I love the fact of thinking of a book as living. I mean, you can't do that with an iPad. I'm sorry. That project would never happen with an iPad. But, I mean, and you can tell I have a real reverence for the book. I mean, I get to examine and handle special collections all over the world, and I'm trying to get into the Vatican. That's going to be my next adventure, because their collection is, from what I've heard, beyond anything I can even imagine. So, any others?
I understand you put them in the Fibonacci circle. And then each of them, the height of each of the elements based on the number of electrons, the orbitals.
Yes.
So the size shows that one.
With a little artistic license.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you only put the field circle, the field orbital.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Well, and one other quick thing I just want to mention, Harvard is showcasing that sculpture for a new online course they're doing teaching chemistry in the 21st century, because Harvard is developing a chemistry course in which they want to get students really excited about thinking about chemistry in new ways and making it more exciting for young students. So I'm really excited to be part of that. I also was brought in to collaborate with them at the beginning of them envisioning how that online course would be. So that was really exciting, having an opportunity. So. Well, anyway, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful crowd. Go get some food and wine. Thanks. And also, if you haven't gotten a catalog, if you would like one, I just want to say that these were designed by my